Good afternoon. At this time, we will bring the Sugarland Animal Advisory Board meeting to order. And we will move on to public comment number 2 on the agenda. Today we have one registered public speaker, and that is Lynn Harpham. Lynn, could you could you state your name and address, please?
I'm Lynn Harpham. Can you all hear me? Okay, I'm Lynn Harpham. I live at 4003 Brenner Court in Sugarland, 77478. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about shelters closing intake this morning. All around the nation, shelters are struggling through a catastrophic combination of low adoptions and high intake, and they're having to turn away kind-hearted citizens toting lost animals. There's a maximum capacity number, of course, at every shelter, and when that's exceeded, the solution seems to be to stop accepting animals. But of course, this practice condemns strays to a miserable existence. It can also have a devastating effect on the community. Houston has seen high numbers of stray dog attacks on humans, some of which have resulted in death. Veterinary behaviorists explain that stray dogs behave differently in packs. And in Missouri City, parts of Richmond-Rosenberg, and unincorporated Fort Wayne County, we already have packs of roaming dogs. Once word gets out about these packs, people dump more dogs there and the problem grows. Nobody, of course, wants to see this happen in Sugarland. And I'm here to just say it would be easier to squelch this activity now than to try to manage it later. The shelter serves not only its stray animals, but its community of people. A citizen who finds a stray dog as she leaves HEB one morning feels helpless and turns to the shelter. I don't think the Sugarland shelter wants this citizen to feel abandoned, but that unfortunately is the end result when what should have been the shelter's burden suddenly becomes this citizen's sole responsibility. Shelters don't have to go it alone. Programs which build on the finder's help are crucial. Wilco has built an excellent program where every single finder is immediately asked if they can hold on to the stray while the staff immediately begins to network it. If a finder is willing and they need to provide a food, a leash, a kennel, they do. If Finder can't, maybe they have a lease that won't allow it, Wilco takes custody of the stray and immediately reaches out to its well-developed foster program. The very last option for any found animal at Wilco is a kennel at the shelter. None of this is easy, but it's possible. And the Sugar Land Way is a thing because this is an educated, affluent community which has already proven it can deliver services well above minimum standard. The Sugar Land Shelter has assembled a staff which is up to this challenge. They just need leadership at the very highest levels of the city to light the way. I'd also like to suggest that Sugar Land draft and publicize its intake policy. As it stands, it's confusing. Sometimes intake appears to be closed when we have fewer dogs than we have at other times. And in the instances I've personally been involved in, the website says the shelter is facing possible closure, but then when I advise a citizen and they call, they're told that it's actually already closed to intake. I end up hearing a lot of anger and confusion about what feels like a duplicitous practice from both volunteers and other citizens. A transparent policy would help. Early steps like soliciting more fosters and doubling down on rescue contacts would leave fewer animals in shelter kennels and would help citizens to understand. I don't mean to be overly simplistic when I say that we don't impose quotas in other core service areas in the city, but it's the truth. We don't ask citizens to fight the fire at a neighbor's house because we've already put out a record number of fires that month. Meeting our community's needs at the shelter is no different, and it's doable, as countless communities, most far less resourceful than Sugar Land, have proven over and over again. Thank you.
At this time, we will close public comment and move on to agenda item number 3, the minutes. Okay, sorry about that. We do have a second person who signed up to speak, and her name is Diane Wright Latham. So she will speak at this time.
My name is Diana Wright Latham. I live at 251 Cedar Elm Lane, Sugar Land. I just kind of want to, I know it seems like we're talking about the same things over and over again, and it's kind of dragging out. And I feel like maybe I'm a hemorrhoid with some of the things that I feel like everybody else does when we're trying to talk. But this past weekend, I went to an event that was at one of the parks out here, the Puptopia or something. And I've seen several things, pop up, and was interested in seeing what they have to offer. And one of the things that I thought was really awesome was, number one, the number of booths that were out there that showed an interest, for people to advertise for that or sign up for it. There has to be, they have to feel like it's worth their time to put all this stuff together and be there. And I was impressed with the volume of that type of stuff, as well as a bunch of different places coming from Katy and some other outlying areas that aren't, specifically just in one spot, that are interested in, at least putting an appearance in this part of town. There were some low cost vaccinations were being given. They had an event a few weeks ago over there that did the same thing. And I think the fact that we're having stuff like that more frequent shows the need, and that people that even outside our own community are trying to come here to help out. They're not just locals, not just from the county or whatever, but there were some people there from Houston, and there was a new place that's it's a different type of ER for animals, but it's something where you can stay with your pet the whole time, that are planning to look into having a location out here next year. I spoke with quite a few of the vendors and got a lot of information on that. So the interest is there, and people outside our community are anxious to come and be a part of this area because they know it's a growing, suburb, and town rather. And I think that the fact that people from other areas besides here are, anxious to do what they can to help us out, that means a lot, because I think a lot of people are hearing about more and more stuff that's going on. Not all that's been good on the news, but at least we know that some things are trying to be worked out. So the fact that they had a lot of people attending too, not just a lot of booths. So to me, that shows that not only people were willing to show what they have to offer, but there were people that were anxious to see what is possibly coming our way. Things like even bariatric treatments for animals, and things you wouldn't think of. And I'm thinking, obviously, they are aware there's a large community of animals in Sugar Land. So I think the fact that, we're so concerned about not fixing the area where we are, we need to concentrate on keeping it in our area. So these people that are not from Sugar Land but want to be a part of our community, helping animals, I think that is something that we need to grab while somebody's got an interest in it. If they think that we're kind of wishy-washy or whatever, can't take a firm stand on stuff, then they may lose interest in what they're trying to do. So I just think that it's something to keep in the back of our minds too when we're talking about the regionalization and getting the expansion and stuff. So probably not. I'm talking too much, but okay, fine. Anyway, there you go.
Are there any other speakers that have signed up? No. Okay. Then at this time, we will close public comment and move to item number 3, minutes.
And email the minutes out to everyone. I apologize for the mishap with the files. I did send out the correct files. Afterwards, hopefully I have a chance to review them.
I vote the accept minutes. I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, then next we will move on to item number 4 on the agenda, animal ethics training.
Good afternoon. We are here to talk about my all-time favorite topic, and you're going to play a game with me as we do this. So as you may recall, I like to play games. So this year we're going to do Cards Against Ethics. So why are we here? We're here to receive an overview of the Sugar Land Code of Ethical Conduct, and because the code requires you to be here. So we're going to have this game, like I said. Let's meet the contestants. Who gets to play with us? So members of City Council, members such as yourself of administrative advisory boards. Every once in a while, we invite former City Council members, administrative and advisory board members to play. And even on special occasions, we bring candidates for City Council to play with us as well. So let's talk about the 8 rules of the game. As you can see, you must disclose conflicts of interest. You get to brag about gifts, which is timely because this is the holiday season. Everybody wants to bribe you with a turkey. You get to brag when you're related to certain vendors, and you can talk about what your kids, your parents may be doing. Can't do business with the city or sit on council. Representations and appearances. This is where I like to talk about what hat you're wearing. And then misuse of city property, participation in procurement, and campaign activity. Now, you may realize that not all these apply to your board, but I know that you are very involved in our community. You might have aspirations to sit on city council, and I just want to let you know what you have to look forward to. Or if you decide something on another board is not behaving, I want you to know what those rules are as well. So let's go. Conflicts of interest, special economic benefits. 2 rules I want you to keep in mind. Business entity, that's called the rule of 10 and 15. So if you, your spouse, your children, or your parents own 10% or more of a business entity, 10% or more of the voting stock, and or receive 10% of your income for the past year, you have a conflict of interest and you cannot vote on the item. Rule of 15, if you own 15,000 or more of the voting stock of that business. If it's real property, it's rule of 25. It's probably supposed to be rule of 2.5, but it's easy for me to say 25. If you own $2,500 or more of the real property value, congratulations, you have a conflict of interest. So you have this conflict, you've decided what you get to do. You get to file a conflicts of interest disclosure statement with the city secretary's office. We ask that you abstain and leave the room. Why do you have to leave the room? We all know baseball signs. We don't want to tip somebody else on the dais that you're telling them how to vote for something. I don't know what signs mean. I don't know if I've just told you to vote yes or no, but just in case, we're going to ask that you step out of the room so there is no confusion. So relationship, when do you get to brag about knowing this vendor? So if you're sitting on city council and you're voting on a contract, if you get 2,500 or more from that vendor in the past year, state law says you get to tell us all about it on a special form you file with the city secretary. Or if you're related to the vendor within the 3rd degree of consanguinity or 2nd degree by affinity, please brag as well. As I mentioned, holiday season is coming up. You get to disclose these things as gifts. This is defined by state law in addition to our code of ordinances. lodging, transportation, entertainment, and food. The best thing is lodging, transportation, entertainment, you get $100 for each. So you can have a pretty nice little trip as long as you don't spend more than 100. If you do, I'd like you to fill out that form again, about the city secretary's office, so we all get to know exactly what special treatment you're receiving. And staff can sit here and be jealous that we ourselves did not get offered that fancy turkey or gift basket. So you will see there's an asterisk next to the word food. This is, instead of just getting a gift card or a basket or that frozen turkey, if you want to take the time to sit with that vendor and you're close enough to have a conversation, you get up to $500. Being the holiday season, order that special dessert. You deserve it. Or an extra drink, or maybe even a meal to go home, because you do get up to $500 before you have to fill out that form. Now you're probably thinking, I don't want to keep all my receipts. So, this, because I'm sure that everybody's offering you food. They don't offer it to me, so they have to be offering it to somebody. But I would suggest that you just fill out the form each time, and that way you don't have to keep track. City staff will go, hey, guess what? You've reached that dollar amount. You can't vote. Like I said, this is only being shared with you so that if you have aspirations of moving on to city council, you know what to look forward to. Or if you're watching a council meeting or you're reading a next story, you go, wait a minute, I have a question here. You know where to look. So there's a couple extra rules I want you to know about doing business with the city. Like I said, if you make it all the way to city council because you have nothing to do on Tuesday evenings, you cannot enter into business with the city. And we call it a significant contract. What's a significant contract? $1,000. So if you're a short timer, you only serve one term, you got 3 years, you can't do business with the city for $1,000. If you're in it for the long haul, you go up to 9 years, it's 9 years, you cannot exceed $1,000 in business with the city. We're really careful on that. If you don't fill out a form, city staff keeps that in mind and says, hold on, you're off limits. We're not going to enter into this contract. Representations and appearances. This is one of my favorite things. I got to talk about what hat you're wearing. So you have a right to go in front of certain boards if you have a personal interest. So if it's your property and you're in front of P&Z and you want a CUP or you want a variance, you can go in there and you can say, in my capacity as the owner of this property, I like to make these following statements. You cannot go in front of that board and go, as an animal advisory board member, I don't think dogs should be on this property, because you're wearing your official hat. You can't do that. Same thing, if you want to post on Nextdoor, it's important for you to say, as a member of this community, my belief is this. That's your personal opinion. You're welcome to have it. If you want to talk in your capacity as an animal advisory board member, you put that hat on and say, in my capacity as an animal advisory board member. You have the privilege of being able to choose which hat you wear. City council, I don't know about you, but if I see them outside, they are only council members to me. They can never take that hat off. So that is one benefit that you have and they don't. Misuse and disclosure of official information. In the extremely unlikely event that you get sued and you get stuck in the back room with me talking about confidential information related to a lawsuit, I'm going to ask that you don't repeat that outside of that room. If you do, it may be a state law violation, but it's certainly a violation of our code of ethics. And you have an opportunity to meet the fine folks on the Independent Ethics Review Board should a complaint be filed against you. Participating in procurement. Once again, this is something that only applies to city council. If we have an agenda item out there, if we're purchasing something, staff does follow state purchasing laws. We ask that you do not get involved. You let staff do their job. In the event that you forget this rule, you go up and you talk to the vendor, not to worry. You're, as a city council member, you're prohibited from voting on that. And just for fun, we'll disqualify that vendor because we want to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to comply with state law. Campaign contributions. Well, as you're out there campaigning, trying to get on city council, and you have nothing to do on Tuesday evenings, please keep in mind you cannot accept a campaign contribution from anybody who's suing the city of Sugar Land for $25,000 or more. We don't want there to be any opportunity for somebody to buy your vote and to have tax dollars spent on a lawsuit and have an unfair advantage. So I went through that extremely fast because I get to do this almost weekly. I know this is an annual suffering for you. If you want to read the whole thing, you can find it in Chapter 2, Article 4 of the city's Code of Ordinances. And you know what? If you have a question on it, because after reading it, you're still awake, feel free to call me or send me an email. I am more than happy to give you a written opinion or talk through it so that you can make sure that you have not caused any issues in your capacity as an advisory board member, or if you choose to sit for another board or even run for city council, I want to make sure you're protected. This is a privilege that I only offer to people that are privileged enough to be appointed to the board. I do not offer this to the citizenship at large because that would be a conflict of interest. And as you're required to follow conflict of interest, so am I. My client is the city and the boards of commission members. So we've gotten this far. If you have decided that somebody is not following these rules and they still are trying to play the game, you have these options. You can file a written complaint. City Secretary's office gets those as well. Magical. They get all the magic documents. So what must you include in a written complaint? It must be signed and sworn. Very important to get kicked back to the. You must have the name of the person who violated the code. And it's got to be somebody who is one of the contestants, elected or appointed official to a city board. City staff were subject to a completely different set of rules. You could follow this all day long, but it's never going to go anywhere. It must also contain the violation that I went under, those 8 things at the very beginning, the rules of the game. It must be a violation of that. And we ask you to say what that violation is. We're not going to ask the Independent Ethics Review Board, your neighbors, to say, what do you think they might have violated? We're going to ask that you do that. For extra help, we do have on the website an automated form. So you can click on there, the code comes up and you can read exactly what those sections are to verify that you have picked the one that you believe is the violation. And then finally, the violation must have occurred within 2 years of you filing the date. Can't go back and say, hey, the mayor from 1985 made this mistake and I'd like you to look into it. They have a free pass, it's greater than 2 years. So you filed that, it comes to me. After the city secretary gets it, they send it to me. And what do? I look at it and go, yep, it's within 2 years. Yep, this person is subject to the code. Oh, yeah, this is something they not should have done if in fact this information is true, and it's signed and sworn. I hand it to the Independent Ethics Review Board. That is where my obligation ends. They take over. It's a conflict of interest. They get their own outside attorney because we take ethics extremely important. And at the end, they start reviewing it. It's a 2-step process. They look at it the first step and say, yep, city attorney got it right. This person is subject to the code. Yep, she can read a calendar. It has been within 2 years. And look, there's a signature and a notary. Okay, now, looking at the face of it, if all the facts contained in this document are accurate, could it be a violation? If yes, then they say, okay, phase 2, we're going to have a hearing. If they go, no, not even close, then it's done at that point, and they send a letter and says, thank you very much for participating, but the game is over, you do not pass go. So sanctions, if they do determine on the second part that violation has occurred, these are the different things that can happen. A letter of notifications, we're a little disappointed in you, we ask you not to do this again, all the way down to number 6 and 7. So you are appointed, city council can unappoint you if they determine a significant violation has occurred. Number 7, because elected officials are elected into office, the only way to get them out is elected out of office. Any questions? All right, you ready? Let's play. This is my favorite part. So we're playing Cards Against Ethics. So the purpose of the Code of Ethical Conduct is, and this is a participatory thing, so feel free to shout out, please.
To establish, what she's talking.
I'm gonna need you to read it. I've done a lot of talking. Someone else is coming.
Establish standards of conduct for officials, candidates, and those who do business with.
Perfect. I'm sorry, what?
Andy keeps you busy.
Yes, ma'am. I'm busy either way. So the purpose of personal conduct and ethical behavior include blank and blank.
Fairness and commitment to the public welfare.
That's
Fairness.
okay. You received a blank from a vendor valued at over $100. Now what are you gonna do?
Right about it.
And I'm curious, are we picking the crews or the llamas? I mean, the talent, but this is an advisory. I was expecting you to think the llamas. So confidential information obtained during a can.
Not be used.
I am so impressed. Y'all are still ethical like you were last time. If you would financially benefit from a contract in which the city is considering purchasing.
The dark ID badges.
You know, it's been unanimous so far. Everybody wants that.
Nobody wants a tube man.
Nobody wants. You should.
File a conflict of interest form.
That form gets so many uses, you'd be amazed how many times. It's a very universal form. So if a relative will receive a financial benefit from an item on the agenda for consideration, you should.
Abstain from participation.
And
File a conflict of interest.
if you have to file that form and you abstain, you should. And okay, this is the one that's specific to you all. If your friend asks you to use your position on the animal advisory board to get them
Out of a ticket for their water money in March.
You must,
Decline to request.
to follow ethics in point A, must be,
With the city secretary.
thank y'all.
Now we will move on to item number 5, workshop item A. Review and discussion on animal shelter partnership options.
I don't know, you can't get rid of me. I mean, I'll be on the board, but okay, so, Rob is not here, so it's just me today. So wanted to give y'all a quick update. We'll talk about the needs assessment that was done by the county, which I gave y'all an update on 2 months ago at the meeting, some next steps. So the ongoing work that is going with Fort Bend County on their needs assessment study, as far as we know, it's been put on hold and needs additional information. We were waiting to have that meeting with the county, but they canceled the meeting. We have yet to been able to get a meeting scheduled with them. They have canceled them thus far. So we have no information to communicate about what they're doing and what their next steps are and timeline or anything. So that's kind of on hold until we can have a meeting with them. So right now staff is working to compile what we call a request for a statement of interest. So it is a formal process that will request any partnership opportunity that is out there. It could be a nonprofit, it could be a for-profit company that can submit their requests to us that they would want to partner with us to operate our shelter. We're going to see if there is any interest. It could be a nonprofit that's in existence. It could be a nonprofit that is willing to spur up. There's the positive to going this route. There's no financial tie to it. It is really we are willing to enter into negotiations or an agreement to operate the shelter, and it starts that conversation. This is not a commonly used practice holistically, but it has been used here for Smart Financial Center to operate that and Constellation Field. And so both have been very successful. And so internally, we are working with purchasing and legal to draft that document to release it hopefully by the end of this year. And then we will see what responses we get, and then can consider those and talk and negotiate if we need to, depending on how many come in. So we're excited to see what we get, and I hope we get some interest. Animal shelter fundraising. So we are, I skipped. Animal shelter design. So we are going to be moving forward with the design of the shelter. We had the conceptual design done, if you remember, but we didn't get into final design. So the final design is going to be moving forward. We are working internally with staff to figure out that process. Are we going to do an RFP, RFQ? How who are we going to hire to help us do that? So that is moving forward, which is exciting, which then also brings me to the fundraising. So we will be working with this board to start and finalize a campaign to fundraise for the portion that we were told, which was, I can't remember, I think it was 2.4. And so this is a question to y'all as board members. We have a donation subcommittee already in existence, which is Ellen, Barbara, and Shelley. Do we want to use that subcommittee to help with the fundraising, or do we want to create a separate fundraising subcommittee to focus on this project? And I open that up to you to tell me what y'all think would be best.
I think that this board has always been willing to participate in the fundraising, and that I don't know whether it remains just those people or it is expanded to others who want to participate. But I certainly feel that we've done a lot of work in the past toward planning fundraising, and I personally would be willing to participate in that. How do the rest of you feel?
It will, so there will be a lot of meetings, because the intent would be this group would draft, create the campaign, and all of y'all would be involved. It would come back to you as an update of here's what we're thinking, or proposing, and get ideas, but needing a working group to really focus and work on it. And then obviously everyone will participate in the actual campaign.
I'm willing to be on that. I think the duties of a fundraising committee are pretty different from what the donations committee
Yes.
started to do.
Yes.
I'm willing to be on the fundraising committee, but I know that Barbara and maybe some others have actually done fundraising in their lives and other capacities before, which I haven't. But that said, I'm still willing to work on it.
Is there anyone else that would be interested? And it's okay if you're not. I'm not trying to pressure. I just want to make sure that we have people who are interested in it. And again, you will get updates in the regular board meetings on their progress and what's been done.
Like Ellen said, I was thinking the same thing, that it sounds like the ask is different than what we did. We talked a few meetings on the donation committee. I know for me, I would be interested as well. I think I would like to know a little bit more about what that, the commitment timeline scheduling would look like. But I'm interested to learn at least that.
Okay. And once we have a better idea, I can call you or send you an email, and then you can say, whoa, like that's too much, or I'm on board. And so you're not locked in just by saying yes now, because we don't know what that's going to look like. We definitely want to make sure that we communicate that opportunity. And
John, you could send a blanket to everyone.
Yeah.
This is the timeline that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Can you participate?
Sure.
'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's very vague. I mean,
Yeah.
how can we set up for something we don't understand what you're going to be proposing? I mean,
Yeah.
first we had a fundraiser group that was supposed to be away from us, and then that failed, or wherever they went, and now you want us to help. I think every single one of us would want to help, but the water is so muddy. What do you want us to do? I mean, what's the timeline? What is your admiration for us to succeed?
I'll let Barbara talk, because she's the one that helped do it 5 years ago.
I think I wouldn't say that we failed, or that committee failed. I would say that there was some indecision with the city about how they were going to proceed going forward. And so there was a point at which we stopped. So we had a formal fundraising plan, and there was a point we got to where the city was vetting paying fundraisers to consultants to come in and do it versus the board. And that was the point at which we stopped. And I think we had gotten to the point where we had a small tentative list of donors to contact and all kinds of information. Community members who had informally committed to donations. So there was a lot of work that was done. The point we were at was, do we hand all this over to the city consultant to pursue, or does this fundraising committee move forward in contacting people and such going forward? But I think your comment about the ambiguity or vagueness is certainly fair, and that we would need to revisit that and maybe further discuss what the needs are of that committee, and also what the what do I want to say? What the parameters that the city has for us are. But was a lot of work done. There was a lot of commitments made. So there's certainly interest in our community for this to not leave our community. So I think we could revisit that and then come back to the board with a review of status and next steps, and or maybe we envision it working like this in the future.
Yeah, and I'll tag on to that too. There's a variety of fundraising opportunities, and it's this subcommittee is going to help hone in on what do we think would work. Would sponsorship opportunities work? Would naming rights work? There's a variety of things that need to be discussed and considered and determine what we can do as a city and what we want to do, because you don't want it too broad of too many opportunities and options. You want to kind of honed in and narrow down so it's clear what donors are potentially getting. And so this group would help us do that.
To clarify, would this be, this is for a Sugarland shelter, not a regional shelter?
This is for a shelter in Sugarland. We are still continuing to have conversations with other entities to determine if they would be interested in a regional shelter type. But moving forward with looking at final design of a Sugarland shelter. But then, so we're running two paths, basically, and we're doing an RSI to determine if there's any partners to operate our current shelter, look at design of the new shelter, which was approved by the bond, or approved by the voters in the GEO bond, as well as continuing that conversation with jurisdictions in the county of do you have interest? And so they're all running concurrently.
Has the city thought about for what projects the bonds might be available and for which projects maybe they aren't?
So the GEO bond funds are specific to the proposition. So the 6 million for the shelter can only be used for a shelter. It cannot be used for another project.
Okay, but a shelter, I think in people's minds at the time was a Sugarland shelter, not a regional shelter, not a part of a shelter that it would go to along with other money from some other place. The basic question is, monies that were approved for that bond issue still going to be available under the terms of the bond?
Yes.
As a practical matter, need to answer that question. We also need to consider whether as a financial matter, given circumstances having changed in the interest market and so forth, whether it's still practical for the city to consider issuing those bonds. And then I think somebody mentioned 2.4 million.
Yes.
And that's derived by subtracting something from something. But the original amount that was sought in the bonds was based upon an estimate of the total to build a Sugarland shelter.
Yes.
Which happened to be significantly more than the amount of the bonds. And that was then.
Yeah.
Now it's 3-4 years later, inflation has struck and so forth, and coming up with a number 2.4 may be way too small. And so before we decide who's going to do what and how we go about doing it, we need to get a handle on what is the money that we're really after. And in the course of doing that, to ask ourselves the question, is the bond money still there? Is it available today, given our financial circumstances and the terms of the bond that may limit what it can be spent for?
Yeah.
And before we go running around doing a lot of research, we need to answer them.
And I can answer that question because I am the owner of that in my former day job, still my day job, I guess. So we have not sold the bonds yet. They are at this point approved but unissued. They can be used for animal shelter. It doesn't specify what type, where. I did clarify with our bond counsel at one point, if we decided to build a regional shelter, we can use them for that.
They just have to be spent on an animal shelter. That's basically all the language that was in the proposition. Financially, we'll look at the cost, to issue the bonds. Obviously, interest rates are significantly higher now than they were in 2019, but that's something that we'll look at, as a whole in our whole bond program. We'll build that into our financial modeling. What we need is a design of a shelter so that we can go and do a cost estimate on it and determine how much money we need. Because
Would you be
it is
using
going to
on the
be,
design that had been used as the basis of the bond issue?
I think we would look at what our needs are today.
So it would move into final design.
Yeah.
So that conceptual design was just programmatic.
Yeah.
It was what program, we need cat housing, we need dog runs. It wasn't final design. So the final design will relook at needs, wants, because that was the separation between the funds was needs versus wants. And then do a final design that then can be priced and say, well, it was 9 point whatever, and now it's 15. And then that will trigger a conversation.
Yeah.
Do we still move forward and keep the 6.6 or 6.2, and then do we fundraise them for the other? That's all part of the conversation that has to happen, but we have to get through final design to have that number to then have discussions.
And then we would have that conversation with city council.
Do you have an idea what it costs to get a final design?
We had
We had 250,000
750 total, and we're using part of it for the intake building. So we'll have to, once we get done with the intake building, we'll have to see what we have left.
So again, it's that question of, do we do an RFQ, do we do an RFP, and then that will tell us the cost. And then if it's 500 and there's $100,000 gap, then we'll have to find that money in order to complete that design.
So, but this shelter in Sugarland, regardless of what partnership agreement it's under, that we would be fundraising for, would it have public oversight with this board? Or?
Yeah, it's still our animal shelter, and so this board does not go away. If a decision is made to regionalize with the county, which again, we haven't had any conversations with, then that's a topic of conversation, but this is just for our shelter moving forward to get that design, to see what's needed, to see the cost, because we all know that we need it.
Well, thank you for looking towards this separate option.
It's also my understanding that anytime the bonds are issued by the city of Sugarland, it has to remain in the city of Sugarland. So you're assuming that any shelter, even regional, will be in the city of Sugarland, therefore it would be our responsibility. And we have land, so to me, Missouri City won't have the regional shelter. You know, Renee down in Fort Bend, they won't have a regional shelter. We'll have the regional shelter. But can we use our bonds to help Missouri City or Fort Bend under our regional shelter? It seems like, well,
I did ask our bond counsel, and we can spend our bond proceeds for a shelter not located in Sugarland if it is our shelter.
but the voters did not sign for that.
No, there was no specification that under the bond.
I mean, that's-
there was no specification on where the shelter was to be located, so. Well, right now, we're looking at keeping it in Sugarland, so I don't know that that's.
But then it would be our expense also. It wouldn't be Fort Bend's expense. They wouldn't care. They'd probably sell, pay $150 per dog and they would wipe their hands of it. Missouri City would too. So that means that Sugarland is taking the brunt of the shelter. And the voters voted on our shelter, our only shelter, and remain in Sugarland. I don't understand. I mean, I don't care what the bond council said, but you can't move. I don't think the voters would be too happy with us or with the city of Sugarland if we took their money and used it at the end of Richmond or something for a regional shelter.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying that. This is the Sugarland shelter. If we do go the path where Stafford and Missouri City say, hey, we want to partner on a regional shelter, that's a capital conversation because they would have to contribute capitally in order to be able to expand a shelter to then house animals from their jurisdiction. It wouldn't be if we do a regional approach with a couple of cities that it's all going to be housed within our existing or a potential new shelter. There would have to be a study, capital contributions, like there's a whole agreement that would have to go into that before that could even come to fruition.
John, we still do have that property that we were originally.
Yes, ours.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
the
still,
whole
we were
site.
considering building it there, so I mean, it's, nothing's gone up, so.
Yeah, that site is slated to have the EOC dispatch on it as well, which is in, I think it's through final design now, the animal shelter, and in the future, a new courts building all on that site.
Yeah, it's 9 acres.
Yeah, it's big.
I'd like to go to the first subcommittee meeting and see if I have, learn a little bit more about it, to see if I have time to add it. Or if I could audit the meeting and see if it's something that I can keep up with. Please.
And I've already, said I would be interested as well. When is the timeline that you think this, I'll call it, I was about to say finance, fundraising committee would need to start meeting?
So Rob is out this week, so when he gets back next week, we were gonna meet and have a conversation to figure out timeline, what our, expectations would be, and then it was just like, we have this meeting, so I'm gonna bring it up with very vague and limited information. But
That's good. We kind of maybe here's what we think next steps look like. That's good. Thank you.
yes, and we will get that to all of you, and then depending on the interest, we can talk about that. I know I'll have to get with Meredith if more, I forget the quorum number, but if we hit a quorum, we'll have to post those meetings. So it's easier to me if we don't hit a quorum, because we can move the meeting if we need to, otherwise it has to be formally posted and all of that.
With 11 members, it would be 6.
Has the city decided? Finalized the design?
Yeah, so this would be final design. So it would design the shelter, like this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to.
Committed to do that.
That's the direction that we're going, is to go into final design, yes.
This is coming from the retreat.
We haven't, you don't commit until you have a contract in place, and so we're working through internally to get that done. Again, we have to decide, it's gonna be a request for qualification.
An idea of when that design might be available.
Oh, it takes months, it's not a quick.
I know.
Yeah, we won't know it until we get a design company on contract to know, or actually prior to, but to know like a general timeline. And so once we have that, we'll add that to the schedule, so you know what the expected timeline is, like what the checkpoints would be, when it would go to council, all of those things.
Okay, Don, I've slept since then, but I thought we did have a floor plan for.
We have programmatic. It was not, this is what the shelter is going to look like, these are the finishes, this is the square footage. It was programmatic, just one big square to show the different components that we would want in the final
I
design.
thought we had a little more than that.
We voted on the exterior.
No, I know, I was saying, I don't.
Interior design.
We did, so it was conceptual. It was not, we're gonna use limestone brick facade with it was just, this is what it would include, again, because it was just, if you remember, just one block. There's no way that we want cat housing next to dog housing, right? Like you want separation. So this takes that block and then further programs it out to how the site needs to be laid out, how the building needs to be laid out, where we want it expanded or expandable, and where we don't want it expandable, where the parking lots, I mean, it nails everything down. And then you take that final design and you put that out to bid. And then that's when you get the bidding, but they will give you a cost, estimate.
And there's new construction drawings and.
Correct. So like that's what we would put out there on the street to get a contractor on board to build it.
Now, I thought one of our presentations at another meeting talked about Shelter Planners of America.
That was Worthing County used Shelter Planners of America. We use Quorum and Animal Arts. So I actually had a conversation with Heather, who's still there, who did ours originally. And so she said if we put out an RFP or an RFP, that they would be interested in submitting.
I just would like to bring up just one last thing, kind of seemingly insignificant, I mean, certainly a surmountable issue, but a place where where things totally broke down last time happened when we were discussing cost of fundraising and making sure, well, not making sure, but who would pay for printed materials and that kind of thing, and gas. And, you know, if we have a consultant, the expectation is that they bear the cost of those things, but get reimbursed from the city. And that was a point where it seemed so small. And sitting in meetings, it seemed an unlikely place for meetings to fall apart. But we were at that point with a list of decisions to make about tasks. Do we want to have this printed thing to hand to donors? When we have a fundraiser, we had gotten to the point where Sweetwater Country Club had committed to a ballroom to have a fundraiser. And I know part of it was that the larger decision hadn't been made yet by the city, and there were bigger discussions that had to take place.
Yeah.
But because that was a point where things just kind of broke down, I'd ask that when you go back, you have some discussion about that, because I'm certainly willing to go above and beyond and do a lot, but paying for the entire printing and development of fundraising material is not something that our committee was going to do. And so and we can certainly, the committee can do work to determine what the material looks like and all of that. I understand that, but I just bring that to you to say that is a point where things just kind of fell apart at our last. We had a list of potential fundraising material. We had done the naming opportunities and had dollar values for all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, and those seem to be the big issues where people might disagree or something. And then we got to this little thing, which was printing of materials, and things just kind of fell apart. So
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting conversations. So I've had conversations with KC Pet Project and what's the Abilene one called? It's slipping my mind right now. But they both did grassroots, not formal campaigns, and Abilene raised over 5 million in a very short period of time. And it was word of mouth. So it'll be interesting to see, to kind of use them to talk about like what they did and what worked well, because that would be part of it too. Like not just us sitting in a room, but hearing from others that have done it recently, and get some lessons learned from them and what worked well and what didn't work well, so that we could hone in on it. And it has to encompass all of that though.
And there's that all of that can be paid for through raised funds. It doesn't have to come out of city budget.
It could be donation funds.
Yeah, but there needs to be permission granted for those kinds of things to be done moving forward. And that's what I mean by the larger conversation and permission. The city hadn't voted on those things and granted this board permission to do those things. And I think that was the reason things fell apart at that point. But just so you know that that's the point we were at.
Okay, we'll make sure that.
I think in the future, I think communication and openness, I mean, get us communication back to the board. Don't keep us in, not knowing what's going on. because that has been an issue in the past. You know, a lot of us didn't even know what was going on. So we are willing to do anything we can, and some of us know a lot of people, but you know, just don't have us jump into fundraisers when nothing else is planned.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So-
Like, we are gonna do it right. And y'all know me, I'm open, I'm transparent. And so if you don't feel like you're getting what you need, shoot me an email, because that's not my intent at all. And Rob's the same way. So hopefully it feels completely different this time, I hope is the goal. Any other questions?
Okay, we will move on to review and discussion of animal shelter and community engagement program update by Cindy King.
Good afternoon. Just a real quick overview of some personnel changes we've had. Natalie is joining us today, so she will be doing her portion of the presentation. She started as our community partnership and program manager on October 2nd. And when I say hit the ground running, that's not even close, because we had Constellation, we had Mega Event, and we haven't slowed down. So still getting her ingrained in what shelter life is going to be. The other thing is we have had some vacancies filled. Ashley Guzman was a contract kennel tech with us, and she had been for probably 7 or 8 months, if not longer. And she did go full-time. We do have 3 part-time kennel tech positions that we're recruiting for. But essentially that'll help when we're short-staffed, because we do have staff there 7 days a week. We have staggered staff, so there's some days that we don't have as many people there. Plus it'll help with being able to staff to have time off. And then with Dr. Bender resigning, we're moving towards hiring a second full-time vet tech, and then a part-time veterinarian. We had talked with her about that, as far as the capacity and things like that. So that's the direction we're looking at going.
And Cindy, just to clarify, the kennel techs are not to fill prior vacancies. This is additional staffing that I was able to obtain.
She was able to, but we're not using contract staffing anymore. That's what it boils down to, is the part-time.
Have been out. And so I did an analysis and determined with Paige and Cindy that this would work better, give us more flexibility having 3 part-timers. So Simeon went full-time, and then we also hired Ashley on full-time, and then we're gonna have 3 new part-timers come on. So hopefully that will eliminate some of the gaps where we only have like 1 kennel tech or 2 kennel techs on staff. We really need 4 every day, and there are a lot of days that we don't have that.
Cindy, can you or Dr. Bender just educate me and maybe somebody else on what vet techs can do and not do? I mean, I know you have to have a vet to do surgery and to do rabies vaccines. What can a vet tech do and not do that a vet can do? I mean, other than obvious.
Yep, that's a good question. In the state of Texas anyway, there's specific, it's written in the laws, specifically like what vet techs are legally allowed to do. So they are allowed to do stuff like give vaccines, and in the shelter, we are also granted additional freedom aside from the general public, because since we technically own the animals, we can also, like, the vet techs can also kind of follow pre-written protocols. So all the protocols that I've left in place, like for common things seen in the shelter, like upper respiratory infections, skin conditions, gastroenteritis, such like that, they're allowed to essentially start those protocols based on specified clinical signs. So the vet techs in general they can run there's a lot of responsibility on them, for running a shelter. And this particular shelter is just not big enough, especially given that it doesn't have a surgery suite, so it doesn't have the capability to do surgery. It's not really large enough to support or to need a full-time veterinarian. The biggest need, where the veterinarian comes in is, legally, only the veterinarian has to be on site in order for rabies vaccines to be administered. The technicians can administer the vaccines themselves, but the veterinarian has to be present. Because that's our license put on the rabies certificate. And then, for additional medical exams that go beyond the protocols for which that have already been established for vet techs to follow. So,
The other treatment that we'll need a vet for is gonna be our heartworm treatment. Our heartworms, which I cover here in a little bit, but that's another thing that we have to have. The vet actually does that. That's.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
So as I said on the next slide, we're still continuing our heartworm treatments. Right now, we are going to be contracting with a vet coming on site to do that. But to date, we have had 50 dogs that we treated. And then we have 4 that still need the treatment. So then we'll bring them back. We'll do the treatment when we have a vet come in and do with contracting with to do it on site. But we do have 11 that have completed the process and then tested positive or tested negative after their treatments, which is a 6-month lag. So after treatments, you retest it 6 months, and we have we're at 100% success rate with that. So doing great with the dogs at that for that. And at this point, we do not have an updated agreement with Fort Bend County for surgery. So we are using contracts to do spay and neuters. We have contracts to do spays and neuters with local veterinarians. I'm going to run through these real quick, mainly for time, but we also y'all have all this information. And this is just updates as we go along. As you can see, we continue to stay busy. And this is some of the call volume that goes through our 311 center, and it's only our daytime calls. So just remembering that these are some of the things that we're having to respond to as far as questions, inquiries, and responses. This is a heat map. This was our ASO response calls. These are specifically our bite, scratch, cruelty and welfare tech, dead animal, roadkill, feral cats, stray dogs, trap requests, trapped animals, and any violations that were reported. So this is just a heat map, and just in the 2 months, it was 160 calls during the days that were mapped because we got an actual physical address from somebody. Again, we talked about this in the last meeting, but essentially, if you look at the hotspots are along major thoroughfares. And these are numbers of, again, feral cats, stray dogs, found pets. And the blue is the calls that we're receiving because people are wanting to surrender their own personal animals. These are just the animals. This is a heat map over the last 2 months of where we had the feral cat and either stray dogs mapped out. And this is the out of area calls that we get. I think in the last meeting, somebody asked as far as, is this all of Fort Bend? These are the ones that 311 drills down on. We don't do all of the little cities within Fort Bend. So these are the areas in our that 311 drills down on as far as when they gather the information. So as of yesterday, our animal count is coming down. And as you can see, it is as low as it's been since the beginning of the year. Sorry. But we are just over capacity, but we have removed all dogs from the cat building, from the back of the cat building. Therefore, it's going to relieve some of the stress on the cats, because if you were ever in the cat building, especially for those of you that were helping clean in the cat building, the constant barking, it was nonstop. So that'll help relieve the stress. We're not having dogs housed in the back of the cat building. And no, we even only have 28 dogs in the shelter. We have 4 dogs under URI quarantine right now. So our ISO room is on quarantine. So that puts another kennel out of service unless a dog has a URI. And then the other problem we have is Monday night, one of our dogs that was in a kennel shredded the wall of the kennel and then chewed through the insulation of it. So until that kennel is repaired, that kennel is out of service. So even though it has 28 and our capacity is 30, we are still at our capacity. So one of the things that I think Natalie is going to cover is going to be the mega adoption event. And we've had some of our team working the mega adoption event, but some of our staff stayed back and deep cleaned the shelter. I mean, super deep clean the shelter. Every single staff, and we even had members from other departments coming in. They were vital to getting our shelter cleaned up while we had animals out, under the direction of Field Supervisor Mike Davis and also Shelter Supervisor Paige Pruden. They were the ones that stayed back and kind of led the charge. And with that, they had lists of things that they wanted to get done each day. And it was really, really awesome to come into the shelter that Monday after the event and see how clean it was. They disassembled bangers. They moved them outside for cleaning. Rooms, the indoor rooms were foamed. They were scrubbed. Kennels were scrubbed and power washed. All the dogs, like I said, were moved out of the back rooms of Whiskerville. And that was deep clean because we actually have now moved some of the kennels, the cat kennels, back into that area. So everything was really deep clean. So the left and right photos here are the 2 side rooms we have, Yogis and Schnauzers, after they got scrubbed really well. And that middle photo just depicts a little bit of the sludge and grime that was found in the drains in the ISO room. After doing this, Mike talked with me, and then we went to facilities, and essentially we're going to be doing some quarterly cleaning that hopefully will help. We can't not have hair and slime and grime. What we're hoping is that it's just not as accumulative if we could take care of it quarterly. I'm gonna apologize because this one's a little out of order on where I wanted it, and I apologize for overlooking that until this morning. But this is Moon Pie. Moon Pie needs a foster. Moon Pie has a ruptured CCL. Essentially, if any of you aren't familiar with that, it's like an ACL in a person. And the surgery she's going to require is going to require extensive aftercare, including probably 6 to 8 weeks of cage rest post-surgery. We have to have a foster committed. We can utilize donated funds to do this, but we have to have a foster committed prior to committing for her surgery. And essentially her future and her outcome is going to depend on a commitment of a foster. We have made several social media outcries and outreaches for this, and yet have any response. So just throwing this out there that we need a foster for Moon Pie for her to get the next step. Back to data, sorry. Our intake numbers remain down because we are only able to pick up juvenile or injured animals, not having the capacity to put other dogs in the shelter at this time. And just our outcomes still don't match our intakes to be able to clear out the shelter. We just aren't seeing the adoption traffic come through. it's not just us talking with other shelter managers, they're going through the same industry-wide issue. The other thing is transfers are down, but many rescues are full. So rescues don't have capacity because they are already, busting at the seams themselves. So they can't take our dogs because they don't have fosters because people already have them. But the other thing I would like to point out here is we do have a fairly good percentage of return to owners. Some months it's much higher than others, but we still are getting as many dogs back to the owners as we can to work through that. So we talked a little bit earlier about cat cages. Our cat cages, we do have new cat cages. They have been delivered. It was a process to get them off the truck. We had some of our staff doing it, but we also had facilities come over and help move them in because it was 18 huge boxes there to get moved in. So this was as they were being set up. But this is what our room looks like now. The cats actually, it's really interesting. They are much more active towards the front of the cages. They're more engaged. It's a nice clean look. And they're not behind bars anymore. They're behind plexiglass. And hopefully it's going to be an easier clean out too. So,
So nice.
looks super. So, I don't know how many man hours were put into it. I know they started on Sunday to get these built out. We thought when we had them wrapped like this, that it was a tower. And apparently it wasn't a tower. It was things stacked on top of each other and shrink wrapped. So then they had to build those each out. So there were a lot of man hours that were put into getting that taken care of, and they took care of them Sunday and Monday this week. So thank you for Mike, the team, Paige, all of them that were involved in doing that. So on our cats, we currently have 16 waiting to make weight for spay and neuter. And then we have 16 that are in foster that are still too small. But we do have 21 available cats waiting for that special someone to come take them home. Our outcome was a little lower this last month, so hopefully that we're going to see some increase as we move forward. Just a deeper dive. And y'all all got the 2 months best friend report, so that's what I am going to finish up on. Any questions? Natalie.
Hello, everyone. I think I've met the majority of you, but my name is Natalie. I am the new community engagement partnership manager. Is that what it is? It's something like that.
Community partnership program manager.
I'll just say it's long. It's long. But I have been with the shelter for a month now. It feels like it's been longer than that, but it's been a great experience. I want to say thank you for welcoming me in to the shelter. I absolutely love it so far and excited for the future. So I just have a couple of updates for you, and we'll kind of move forward. So I wanted to start with great news for October. Our very own Dorothy. Who's met Dorothy here? We have a couple. Yes, Dorothy is beautiful. I met her when I came in. She finally got adopted after being at our shelter for over a year. It's a beautiful story. The gentleman actually met Dorothy at the mega event, which we had in October 21st, I believe it was that weekend. He met Dorothy. He actually adopted this puppy there that's there with him as well at the mega event. And yeah, he met Dorothy, fell in love, wasn't quite sure just yet. Obviously, he wanted to go home and just see how it was going with the new puppy that he had. Anyways, he came to the shelter days later, had a sleepover. Dorothy had a sleepover, and they absolutely fell in love with each other. So it was a great story. I was going to share the video, but if you haven't seen it, we have a video on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. We did this whole celebration for Dorothy as she's walking outside the door. We made some confetti. We made it happen. It was exciting. But anyways, that's some good news. Dorothy has been adopted, so it's really great to see that our long stays finding a forever home. So that's a good story. Recent events that we had our very own Constellation adoption event. This was prior to me coming into as this position. Jillian, who was before me, she was the one that set this up, worked alongside Best Friends. And it was a great time. We had people come over. Obviously, you can tell some of the people were dressed, they had their costumes, but we had some great adoptions. We had Sugarland, we were there, Rosenberg, Bird Foster Life Rescue was also there, Fort Bend was there. In total, we had 23 adoptions, which was overall was good numbers. But most importantly, I think this event was successful because we kind of got into Constellation, right? We have the contacts, we have the people to talk to, and we are looking to have something in April, if not back again in October. But the conversations are going of having a bigger event. What better place than here locally, right here in our own city, Sugarland, and having other shelters be part of it. So there's that conversation that we're having with Best Friends, Sophia, who's at Best Friends, Deidre is also at Best Friends, just kind of talking how we can make this bigger and better. So that's exciting news. So that's one of the events that we had. We also had the Petco Mega Adoption Event. 901 animals were adopted. Many rescues and shelters were part of this event. It was long days at this event, starting from Wednesday, I believe, where we set was it Thursday all day set up with some of our staff members were there, all the way to Sunday at 7 p.m. we were cleaning up to come back home. So very long days, but we made it happen. We had 17 of our very own, and then that's obviously Dorothy through that event got adopted. In comparison to last year, the numbers were a little lower just throughout the entire event itself. You know, we're talking to Rosenberg, who was next to us, and they had 9 adoptions when last year they definitely had a lot more. So like you were saying, adoption numbers are low in general in the city of Houston, in our field. But overall, we'll take the 17 and hopefully next year we can get a lot more at this mega adoption event. But it's pretty cool to partner with all these shelters and get to know each other and help each other out. So that was, and all the volunteers that came out and helped us out was a great event. Perfect. These are some pictures. Yeah. So this was the first one, which is cute, which we all thought definitely all the puppies were going to get adopted first, which was right. So this is kind of the setup. Some of the pictures of our beautiful puppies and kittens, of course.
And our team.
They were amazing. These are some of our kennel techs. Perfect. Another thing that we had this month was the Yahi Hour with PetSet. This was actually my first event. Jillian was still here, but we had PetSet came and did some training with some of our volunteers. I believe you were there, correct? Ellen, were you there that day? Yeah. So PetSet came and trained some of our volunteers and how, pretty much in shelter environments, and kind of how to deal with our cats and how to deal with our dogs. So this was pretty awesome to have and offer to our volunteers. Perfect. We had some of our staff. We worked with the Parks Department. We called it a Yappy Hour. It was October 19th. 33 dogs were microchipped at this event, which is a good number. We do have a grant that we have, and we're able to offer microchips. So that was pretty exciting. I wasn't there, but overall it was a success. And it was cool to have some of our animals here locally be microchips. Perfect. Upcoming events that we have. We do have a microchip event. It's December 2nd. Like I said, we have a grant. So we are offering microchips to the city. So hopefully we'll have 50 or more dogs. That's the goal. Microchip in Richmond. The address is actually Richmond. It's called Bart Park. I believe that's what it is. I have all the information. I just got it today.
River Park.
It's River Park. It's in River Park. River Park. That's what it's called. So River Park.
It's an HOA is putting it on.
We'll be there. It's a Saturday at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. microchipping some of our dogs that day. This was out of order, but anyways, an update. We have a new logo. Dr. Bender was not a fan. I didn't see her. We have a new logo, and Austin was working with us, with Jillian again. They were working on making a new logo for the shelter. This is kind of what we all decided to go with. So this is mainly how it looks. It has the crown for Sugarland. So if you do see the icon, you'll know that it's Sugarland, hopefully. And obviously you see the dog, the paw print, and you obviously know it has to do with dogs, right? Or animals. So that's a new logo that we have. I literally just got all the files in yesterday. So soon we'll be working with making some printing out some marketing material because we absolutely need it. Tablecloths, banners, hopefully some canopies, those tents that we see at these events, kind of like what the citizen was saying about, being at these events and just being, having all of that ready for events like that. Some flyers, maybe some cool things that we can sell, volunteers can have, some t-shirts. So that's pretty much how it looks, the color that we're going to stick to, the branding. So hopefully you like it. If you don't, just talk to Cindy. If you don't talk to Cindy, not me, I'm kidding. No, this is what it is. Perfect. That same day, December 2nd, we are going to have a home for the holidays with Houston Pets Alive. I actually come from Houston Pets Alive. So we are going to be working together. It's a nonprofit. We're going to be working a lot together when it comes to these adoption events. So hopefully we'll have the opportunity to take some of our long stays to these events. This is in Houston. So they do expect more than 500 people go to these events every year. There'll be some vendors, there'll be some other shelters, but it's a great opportunity to take our dogs out so that they can meet people and hopefully find their forever homes. So we are working hard getting our dogs out there, social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and events like these. Perfect. More ideas to come. We are planning with my team creating more of an on-site small adoption events as once a month, ideally, possibly having it there at the shelter, using the free marketing, which is social media, spreading the word and just having people come see our animals, possibly bringing some cool little things for children just to get people's attention, say, hey, we're here. This is our address. These are all the animals that we have. So that's the ideas that we're coming up with, and hopefully soon, again, just spread the word. I know adoptions are down, but I know we can work hard and get those adoption numbers up. And obviously just have the animals, as soon as they're coming in, getting them out as well. So those are things that we're going to do. Happy hour, more training for our volunteers and some of our staff as well. So bringing in trainers to come in and teach us everything that, just continuing to learn how to deal with our animals and learn more. So those are the new things coming up. Yes.
I just want to point out the picture on the right, the board, the staff, current staff doesn't know because they haven't been here long, but the board knows that I brought Sammy to a board meeting a little over a year ago.
Yes.
And this month, Sammy will have been at the shelter 2 years.
Yes.
So we need a home for Sammy.
Yes, we do need a home for Sammy. And again, with all these, let me make sure that was it. Yeah, that was it. Again, with all the, in my job, what I'm doing, like I said, is trying to bring more, show off our dogs, Sammy, Dorothy, all these dogs that have been with us for a long time, how can we share their story and make it more interesting, get people to watch and to hear, and obviously finding them a forever home is our goal and our mission. So yes, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I would like to ask the board something first. Of all the things that have been presented today, how many of you saw any of this in your own personal social media presence outside of, say, shelter communication, or have you seen
Facebook.
So okay, so
I saw it on Instagram.
Instagram.
Some of the pictures that you showed, I saw the exact same ones on Instagram.
and the reason I asked that question is because something I hear continually is why isn't more shared with the community? I think that the shelter does an excellent job at creating material to be shared. Maybe it's algorithms or, there's, especially on Facebook and, if there's not a certain interaction, but my point is that
feedback I get from the community is that we don't hear about something until like after pictures are posted, that an event has occurred. So our Sugarland community that we all keep saying we want to adopt more animals or become more interactive with us, they would likely be our donors. They're certainly the people who want to keep a shelter in Sugarland. Feel like they don't know, or they don't proactively get information. And I do believe it's the algorithms, but I would just say if there's anything we can do to improve that or increase the material that's going to Sugarland specific residents, that would be great.
I have a question. So we are putting the ads at Constellation Field and Smart Financial Center. So if you're driving up Highway 6, you see it there, or at 59. Is there anywhere else that you feel like we should?
We also have the mall.
And we have the ad at the mall, but that's a static ad, but the other ones we can pretty much change out weekly. So is there anywhere else you would suggest that we?
Okay, I know
The city's main presence has shared our posts on some of the larger events.
not just social media, but Jillian, I know used to talk about getting in front of HOA groups and meetings, and I look at my HOA's agenda every month for their meeting, and I've never seen us come out, and we also do a newsletter. So I think we should hit some of these HOA meetings. We can at least get on our newsletter with the events.
I have thought that for maybe 2 years. Because I am on an HOA. And they claim that there is the City of Sugarland media person that meets with HOA people. Well, I'm sorry, but HOAs don't show up. So if you don't show up, if they don't get to me.
Yeah.
And if you people don't go to the HOAs or make an effort, or the newsletters are free. And I have been invited by the HOA, you have too. They will slot a spot every single month for you. And nothing has happened. And I've been here many years on the board.
We'll get with Jennifer and Carly.
Yeah, thank you.
They manage the HOA contacts, and I know they do have
do something.
Right, and so they'll get us on the agenda.
Well, and write the articles in the paper also. I mean, somebody who you've got a golden opportunity to market Sugarland, because everybody in an HOA gets a newsletter and they flip it through and they see these cute little dogs with the cute little cats, and somebody reads them. But if nobody writes the article to promote our shelter, we are kind of fighting in the dark.
Okay, that's very helpful, because we don't live in Sugarlands in an HOA, so we don't see this stuff, and so it's helpful to hear that.
And the other thing our shelter used to do under prior manager was visit the schools, because we did the education and we had the possum, Penelope.
Oh, yes, yes.
So we had an animal, and we would go to the schools, and so you talk to the kids and they go home and talk to the parents. You've got to hit all of them.
We have to get our wildlife certification back. We do not have our wildlife certification.
Well, I mean, you could take a cat with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, some of us, we have an animal assisted therapy, which has been approved to go into schools. They don't need to have my dog knowing that it's from a shelter. We can market the shelter. I mean, we have an extended, I'm going to a school off of Fondren. I go to the international school. I'm not saying, we can fly out information or, we have done nothing. We have done nothing. Go ahead.
So harsh. Also, in addition to schools and HOAs, most churches I am not a churchgoer, but I grew up in a very active parish up in Ohio, and they also had a newsletter. So I do think most local churches would be willing to even at the least give us a small shout out in their newsletters, but sometimes even mention it during the homily or whatever the announcements. But yeah, I think those would be small micro communities too that we could target for outreach.
I agree. Thank you.
I think just one other thing, I'm gonna go, for a lot of discussion, I'm gonna go back to the social media part of it. I know, I don't know about the algorithms, I don't know about all that. But I do know that if anybody on the board, if you see it, share it. I always share it. And I'm gonna take a very unpopular opinion. I agree that there's a lot of opportunity. Let me just say that. The schools is a good one. I used to teach high school. I used to be an extension agent. I know I taught FFA. I got kids that I had students that were in the vet tech program. You do have a population there that can help you. So I'll just leave it at that. I've been out of schools for a long time. I don't want to go back. But my popular opinion is, yes, there's opportunity to do more. But I think sometimes when people say, oh, I can't find anything, they're not looking. I know when I want to take advantage of something or when I want to know something, I will go search that. So if somebody is, in my opinion, really interested in what the city of Sugar Land is doing, the information is there for them to find. We could always do better. We can always be opportunity, newsletters, churches, schools, all that. We can just give them more information. Then it's going to be up to them to go find it, or it's going to be up to them to see a posting, to see the newsletter, to see the social media and call. But when I hear, oh, I can't find anything, you're not looking.
Well, I don't hear that they can't find anything, but I do hear often that they see things after, like an adoption event, after it, they'll see the pictures posted from it, but the advertising pre-event for them to attend that thing. And I agree with you.
It is there.
It was.
I'm not suggesting that people are just sitting back. I'm just saying we need to flood them with more information. And then at some point, the responsibility is theirs to pick up the phone and call, or to show up at an event or to do something.
But for Sammy, for instance, people don't know to come looking for him specifically, but I bet you there's somebody out there that if they heard his story, there is a person. So I'll personally get with you and take a greater responsibility to try to get his story out if you like. But I just think that there's, I don't know what the answer is. It's just something I hear enough that I'm wanting to relay to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all your guys' ideas. Like I said, feel free to email me any of these ideas. I do not live in the city, like you were saying, in the city of Sugar Land, so there may be some things that I am not aware of, but please feel free to email HOA, any way that we can do it. Free marketing, why not? We should be able to use anything that's free. Obviously, there will be conversations of, investing in ads, possibly in Facebook, but I did send out an email or a text to the teams of volunteers. I said, first of all, thank you for all your help, but the best thing that you guys can also do is share. As soon as you see something, share, because if it's coming from you directly and your friends are seeing it, that has so much more weight than if it was coming from us, right? So if you do see anything, share it. Again, send any ideas you may have. We're all on the same team, and we're all with the same mission. I want to see the dogs. I want to see Sammy adopted. I want to see long stays adopted. That is our goal. That is our mission. So anything you guys need, feel free to email me, and hopefully we can continue to do good, right? But other than that, I'm done, I think.
So before you go,
Yes, ma'am.
all right, since you may not get, there's a community, Broadband community issue, like a bulletin that comes out once a month.
Yes.
That if we knew dates ahead of time, I'm sure you could probably say, hey, can you add this? Because I looked through that whole thing. My husband looked through that whole thing.
It's actually one of the few things in the mail that I actually bring. And then, you know, they throw like the Sugarland sign and the little Fort Bend thing that they throw on your lawn twice a week that you have to get rid of. I mean, just as long as you have a date ahead of time, just say, hey, can you run the date? I would imagine that, I mean, they're serving this area. So, I mean, I would think if you could just reach out and just see, it might not cost anything. It might be like a PSA type thing. So I would check those three actual physical things that people actually get in the mail. Because, yeah, if you talk to a 80-year-old lady, she's not going to get on and look through Facebook. I don't even know how to look.
Yeah, and I do agree, that's something with marketing that, you know, we know that, you know, we definitely get a younger generation that's on TikTok. My original Facebook, yeah. Younger generation on TikTok, we're gonna have Cindy's generation on Facebook. Yeah, that is true.
To the director's report, item 6 on the agenda.
All right. So, in the interest of time, I'm going to go fairly quickly. I don't have very many slides. But I'll give you an update on the donations fund. A couple of things on our grants. We did receive a Best Friends Life Saving Grant. This is targeted toward a community cat program. We signed the agreement in September. We received our first installment, which was $5,000. It's a total of $10,000 grant. We received the first payment in October. This morning, actually right before this meeting, we had our first training on the community cat program introduction. We had a great attendance from almost all of the shelter staff and some staff from 311 who are interested in helping us support the program and learning the terminology as they take calls. So it was really interesting. We did apply for the Rachel Ray Save Them All grant. We submitted the letter of interest, I think is what they called it, in September, but we were notified on Friday that we were not selected to move on in that grant. And that was the grant that we were going to do. We were proposing a low-cost spay and neuter program. So we were not selected for that, unfortunately. That would have been a great opportunity for us to bring something new to the community.
I'm sorry, what was the amount of that grant that you were not selected to?
It was up to 10% of your budget, which for us would be about $44,000. It depended. They said the average award was 20 to 25,000. But we will keep trying.
We asked for the 10%.
Yeah, we asked for 10%. And you know, that was our first attempt at applying for something like that. So we're going to keep our eyes out and keep going if we see something else. It was a great idea, and you know, we want to continue to pursue it. On the policy updates, so we are working on updating our SOPs, which is our operating procedures. I did email you all a copy of the euthanasia policy. With Dr. Bender's departing, we needed to make some changes in the staff references in that policy because it referenced a team and specifically called out the vet position. So we've just made some modification there to make it mostly the supervisory team, and that it has to be a majority of the team making the recommendation. Still the same criteria for consideration of euthanasia, either for medical or behavioral issues. But right now our hands are kind of tied on whether we would be able to even do a euthanasia. So we wanted to get that policy update before you and make sure you all were comfortable with that. We would still have the same notification internally. They would bring the management team of the shelter would bring that to me ahead of time, and then I would pass that along to Jim and Mike as FYI, so that they would be aware that it was happening.
Can we have a longer discussion on that, possibly in subcommittee?
Sure.
Thank you.
I probably need a list of who all the subcommittee members are because I don't even know at this point. So I'm like furiously taking notes on the subcommittees as John was reading those off. Okay, yes, we can definitely talk about that. And then on the ordinance modifications, so part of this Best Friends Life Saving Grant is they are going to help us write the TNVR ordinance. And so we've gotten some examples from other cities, and we'll be working with them to draft our ordinance. And so we'll bring that back once we have worked through that with their team. So donations report, this is almost final update. The fiscal year 23 numbers are not audited yet, but they are working on like all the year-end entries. So this is just a brief update from the last one that you saw. So we ended up bringing in almost 25,000 in donations in fiscal year 23. We also earned almost $6,000 in interest income, which is tremendous. And then we have our $10,000 Petco grant. So brought in $40,745. We spent a total of $10,404. I think the only real addition to what I shared last time was the QR code generator, which we had to get a subscription for that online for the QR code on the ad at the map to work. We discovered after we published it that they were basically held us hostage for the annual subscription to that particular QR code. And then the enamel pins, those are the cute puppy and kitten pins that we ordered from what was her name? Daisy, yes. And so we had those out at the event at Constellation Field. And she had a bunch of her other pins on display at her table as well. And I think that was the only other change from the last time you all saw this. So I expect our ending balance will be 173,443, give or take, due to year-end audit entries. They'll probably accrue some interest or whatnot on there. So assuming that is the starting balance, then you can and I did not update the ending balance number here. I'm probably off about $100 from what I had on there before. So I will point that out. I did update the year-to-date number. So we're budgeted to bring in 15,000. We've already brought in almost 3,500 in donations in 5 weeks of the fiscal year. We've had several $1,000 donations that have come in, which is fabulous. Love it. End of the year, you know, everybody's thinking about their charitable donations. And so we've had several donors who learned of us recently and are making those larger gifts. We already earned $757 in interest income in the month of October, which is like probably more than we earned in the last 2 years in total. And then we have our $5,000 in grant revenue. We went ahead and we're running that through this fund just to keep it out of the general fund. And so then to date, we've spent $7,200. The majority of that is the payment to for Constellation Field and for our advertising at the mall. So those are the basic things. And then reimbursements to our volunteers for the event at George R. Brown. We did pay for parking for our volunteers who came down, which I think was a nice benefit to those who volunteered.
How much does Constellation Field charge us for going in here?
It was $5,600, and that included their staffing and security. So that was part of it. We did get a discounted rate for the rental, but they do operate, you know, we do own it, but the actuaries operate it.
Are very big with Constellation.
Yeah, so they did have, you know, they had ticket agents, the security, then they had to have somebody open the building and clean up after us. So they did detail out those charges, but it was a great venue, and I'd love to look into having another event there.
Before you change slides, you guys, you mentioned the $3,000 that you've gotten a couple of $1,000 and that people are hearing about us. Do you, as a city or as the shelter, have any plans to really promote Giving Tuesday since that's coming up? Have any kind of marketing campaign?
That is a great idea.
People don't know that you can do that.
No,
that would be a huge thing to take advantage of.
Yeah, and we also, I think since the last board meeting, we are now able to take donations online. And so we have a QR code that we have created, that there's a link in the through the city's payment portal, where take your phone, you can scan the QR code. We have a poster thing on the front desk at the shelter. We take it to events. People can scan that and make a donation directly with their phone. And we've gotten several in that way already, which is great. They don't even have to come to the shelter to make that donation anymore. But no, the Giving Tuesday is a great idea. Okay, so and I think I've mentioned both of these already. We will talk through the euthanasia policy changes with the subcommittee. And when we get a draft of the GMBR, we'll bring that to the ordinance committee. I think it's the ordinances. I think that was the name of the committee. I'm not sure. So, and that is all I have. So, went ahead and booked out, based on meeting on the second Wednesday of the month, what the schedule will be through the remainder of the fiscal year. So if you want to mark those dates on your calendar, you at the next meeting or subcommittee meeting, whichever it may be.
Thank you. Now, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll second.
Second. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. If you have not already, please stop by the city secretary's office to do your oaths.